6 months passed after the Battle of Valara Prime. The galaxy had changed in that time. News of humanity's victory spread to every corner of known space. The species that once avoided Earth now looked at it with new eyes. Fear remained, but it was mixed with respect, and for some, hope. The formal invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. Commander Yun read it 3 times to make sure she understood correctly. The Galactic Unity Pact was inviting Earth to join as a full member. All benefits included: access to advanced technology, trade agreements, a permanent seat on the Unity Council. The debate in Earth's government was intense but short. Some worried about the obligations that came with membership. Others saw the opportunity. Humanity had been isolated for so long. Now they were being welcomed into galactic civilization, not as conquerors, not as threats, but as partners. Earth accepted. The question then became who would represent humanity on the Unity Council. Yun recommended Captain Day. The choice surprised many. Day was a military officer, not a diplomat. But Yun argued that was exactly why she was perfect. She had proven herself on Valara Prime. She understood both sides of humanity, the warrior and the protector. The other council members would trust her because she was honest and capable. Day accepted the position with some reluctance. She was more comfortable on a ship's bridge than in a political chamber. But she understood the importance of the role. Earth needed someone who could represent them fairly, someone the galaxy could work with. The Unity Council station was even more impressive in person than in recordings, a massive structure floating in neutral space. It contained chambers for hundreds of species, each designed for their specific environmental needs. The architecture was beautiful and functional, a symbol of cooperation between different worlds. Day arrived with a small delegation. Hana met her at the docking port. The Valaran ambassador had become a strong advocate for human integration. She guided Day through the station, introducing her to other council members. The reactions were mixed. Some species greeted Day warmly, grateful for what humanity had done. Others were more cautious. They welcomed Earth's membership but clearly had reservations. A few avoided her entirely. But that was fine. Trust would take time. The first major council session Day attended focused on security. The Krell had been defeated at Valara Prime, but they were still out there. Other threats existed too: pirates, rogue states, species like the Krell who saw peaceful civilizations as prey. The Unity Pact needed a way to defend itself. Day listened to the debate for hours. Many council members wanted stronger defenses but had no idea how to create them. Their species had never developed military traditions. The concepts were foreign to them. Finally, Day spoke. She proposed the creation of the Unity Defense Force, a multi-species military organization. Humans would provide training and tactical expertise, but the force would include soldiers from all member species. Each would contribute their unique strengths: Valaran medical skills, Lithian engineering, Mirian adaptability, ether technology, combined together under unified command. The proposal caused immediate debate. Some council members embraced it. Finally, a way to protect themselves. Others worried about militarizing their peaceful alliance, about losing what made them different from aggressive species, about giving too much power to a military force. Day addressed their concerns directly. She explained that the Unity Defense Force would operate under strict council oversight. Its mission would be defense only. No offensive wars, no conquest, no aggression, just protection, standing guard so that peaceful species could remain peaceful. The debate continued for 3 days. Compromises were made. Rules were established. Finally, the vote came. The Unity Defense Force was approved. Sergeant Baum received new orders. He was being reassigned, not to combat duty, to training. He would teach the first class of Unity Defense Force recruits. The job would be challenging. Teaching aliens to fight when most of them had never even held a weapon. But challenging was what Baum did best. The first class arrived on a training station built specifically for this purpose. 50 recruits from a dozen different species. Valarans who wanted to make sure the Krell could never threaten their people again. Lithians whose crystal bodies made them natural engineers. Mirians whose aquatic origins gave them unique movement capabilities. Ethers whose gas-based forms could operate in environments others could not. Baum looked at them and saw the challenge ahead. Most had never experienced violence. Many had cultural taboos against harming living beings. Their bodies were not built for combat like humans were. This would not be easy, but Baum had trained soldiers before. He knew how to adapt. He started with the basics. Not weapons, not tactics, but mindset. He taught them what it meant to be a warrior. It did not mean enjoying violence. It meant being willing to stand between danger and innocent people, to accept fear and act anyway, to understand that sometimes the only way to protect life was to be willing to take it. The training was hard. Some recruits quit. Others struggled but persevered. Slowly, they began to change, not becoming human, but becoming something new. Warriors from peaceful species, protectors who understood both the value of peace and the cost of defending it. The Unity Defense Force faced its first real test 4 months into training. Pirates attacked a mining colony on the edge of Unity space. The colony sent a distress signal. The Defense Force mobilized. Lieutenant Tay commanded the response team. 20 humans and 30 alien soldiers. This would be the first time they fought together in actual combat. Tay was nervous. Training was one thing. Real battle was completely different. Would the alien soldiers hold under pressure? Would the coordination work? Would people die because she failed to prepare them properly? The pirates were from a species that specialized in raiding. They were testing the new defense force, seeing if it was actually capable. They expected easy prey, peaceful species playing at being soldiers. They were wrong. The Unity Defense Force coordinated perfectly. Human soldiers provided the combat experience and leadership, but the alien soldiers contributed just as much. A Velaran medic saved a wounded human's life with quick thinking. A Lithian engineer disabled pirate weapons using crystal manipulation. A Mirian squad used their water-breathing abilities to attack through the colony's flooded sections, catching pirates by surprise. The battle was over in 2 hours. The pirates were captured. The colony was saved. And most importantly, the diverse force had worked together like they were meant to. News of the victory spread quickly. More species requested to join the Unity Defense Force. Earth received requests for additional military advisors and trainers. Humanity found itself in an unexpected role. Not conquerors, not mercenaries, but teachers and partners. Day stood in the observation deck of the council station, looking out at the stars. She thought about how far humanity had come. For thousands of years they fought each other on Earth. Wars over resources, territory, ideology. So much death. So much suffering. All that violence had shaped them into warriors. But now they were using that strength differently. Not to conquer. Not to take. But to protect. To give others the safety that humanity had to fight so hard to create for themselves. Hana joined her at the viewport. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two beings from completely different worlds. One shaped by peace, the other by conflict. But both working toward the same goal now. Hana said that humanity had given the galaxy something it desperately needed. Not just military strength, but courage. The courage to defend their way of life, to stand up to threats, to refuse to be victims. She thanked Day again, and she promised that the Valarans would never forget what humanity did for them. Day simply nodded. She was not good with emotional moments, but she appreciated the sentiment. On Earth, Commander Yun reviewed reports from across the galaxy. Human advisors were stationed on dozens of worlds now. Human technology was being integrated with alien systems. Human military doctrine was being adapted for non-human physiology. Humanity was becoming woven into the fabric of galactic civilization. It was not the future anyone had predicted. Earth had been isolated for so long, feared, avoided. Now they were essential, trusted, valued. But Yun knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, full of threats both known and unknown. The Unity Defense Force was growing stronger, but challenges remained. Some species still opposed human integration. Some threats were too large to face easily. The future would bring more conflicts. But for now, there was hope. On the training station, Baum watched his latest class of recruits run through combat drills. They were getting better, faster, more confident. He saw warriors emerging from beings who had never fought before. It was beautiful in its own way. One of the Valaran recruits approached him after training. She asked if he ever regretted becoming a soldier. If he wished he had lived a peaceful life instead of a violent one. Baum thought about it carefully. Then he answered honestly. He did not regret it. Yes, he had seen terrible things, done terrible things, lost friends, carried scars both visible and hidden. But he had also saved lives, protected innocence, given people like her the chance to live in peace. That made it worthwhile. The recruit nodded. She understood now. Being a warrior meant accepting darkness so others could stay in the light. 3 days after the battle, Valara Prime was still recovering. The Krell were gone, but the scars remained. Broken buildings, scorched earth, thousands of dead. Human soldiers moved through the ruins, helping with rescue efforts. They used their powered armor to lift debris. They shared their medical supplies. They worked alongside Valaran survivors without complaint. Hana watched them from the temporary command center. She was trying to understand these creatures, these humans. They fought with terrifying violence. She had seen them destroy the Krell without mercy. But now they were gentle, patient. They helped scared children find their parents. They comforted grieving families. The same soldiers who crushed Krell warriors with their bare hands now carefully bandaged Valaran wounds. The contradiction confused her. How could they be both? She requested a meeting with Captain Day. They met in what remained of a meditation garden. The crystal trees were shattered, their pieces scattered across the ground. The fountains were dry, but it was quiet, peaceful in its own broken way. Day arrived wearing simple fatigues. No armor, no weapons. She looked almost normal, almost like she could be any other being. But Hana could see the muscle beneath the fabric, the scars on her hands, the predator eyes that constantly scanned for threats even in a peaceful garden. They sat together on a broken bench. Hana asked the question that had troubled her since the humans arrived. How could they be warriors and peacekeepers at the same time? How could they kill so efficiently and then show such compassion? Day was quiet for a moment. Then she began to explain. Earth was not kind to humanity. Their world tried to kill them every single day. Predators hunted them. Diseases infected them. Natural disasters destroyed their homes. Ice ages froze entire continents. Volcanic eruptions blocked out the sun. Humanity survived because they learned to be tough, strong, adaptable. But surviving nature was not enough. Humans also fought each other. Tribe against tribe, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. War became part of their existence, not because they wanted it, but because they needed to survive. The humans who learned to fight effectively lived. Those who did not died. Evolution favored the warriors. But humans also learned something else, something equally important. They learned cooperation. Individual humans were weak compared to the predators that hunted them, but humans working together were unstoppable. They formed groups, families, tribes, nations. They protected each other. They shared resources. They developed language to communicate complex ideas. They created culture to bind themselves together. Humanity's capacity for violence grew alongside their capacity for compassion. The same social bonds that let them work together in hunting also made them fiercely protective of their group. They would die for each other, kill for each other, sacrifice everything to protect those they cared about. Day looked at Hana with those predator eyes. She said that humans were dangerous precisely because they cared, because they formed deep emotional connections, because they could love so intensely that they would commit terrible violence to protect what they loved. That was why her soldiers fought so hard against the Krell, not because they hated the enemy, but because they saw the Valaran people and recognized something worth protecting. Innocence, families, children, things worth fighting for, things worth dying for. Hana listened carefully. She was beginning to understand. Humans were not monsters who happened to show kindness. They were not peaceful beings who learned violence. They were both things at once, woven together so tightly that you could not separate them. She asked another question. What about Earth being classified as a death world? What did that really mean? Day explained that death world classifications were about more than just danger. They were about adaptation. Earth's high gravity made humans strong. The need to eat diverse foods made their digestive systems incredibly flexible. They could eat things that would poison most species. The constant threat of predators made their reflexes fast and their senses sharp. The variable climate taught them to adapt to any environment. Even human healing was impressive. They could survive injuries that would kill other species. Broken bones would mend, torn flesh would close. They had redundant organs, high pain tolerance, incredible endurance, all because Earth demanded it, and their minds were just as adapted as their bodies. Humans evolved as social hunters who needed to coordinate complex strategies. They developed sophisticated language, advanced planning, the ability to think abstractly. These same mental tools that helped them hunt animals also made them deadly in warfare. Everything about humans was dangerous. But that danger came from the same place as their strength, their adaptability, their determination, their refusal to give up even when facing impossible odds. Hana absorbed this information. She thought about her own people. Valarans evolved on a gentle world, abundant food, no major predators, stable climate. They never needed to develop these traits. Violence was completely foreign to them, and that meant they were helpless when violence came to them. She wondered if her people would ever recover from this experience. The Krell invasion had shattered their worldview. They had learned that the galaxy was not safe, that peace was not permanent, that sometimes survival required violence. But they had also learned something else, that there were those who would stand between them and danger, that the Deathworlders, scary as they were, could be trusted to protect rather than destroy. News of the human victory spread quickly across the galaxy. The Galactic Unity Pact had been saved by the species they feared most. Other civilizations began to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. Perhaps these Deathworlders were not the threat everyone believed. Perhaps they could be allies. Hana drafted a report to the Unity Council. She recommended that humanity be invited to join the alliance. She argued that their military capabilities, combined with their demonstrated willingness to help others, made them valuable partners. Yes, humans were dangerous, but that danger could be directed, focused, used to protect the peaceful species that had no other defense. The council debated her recommendation. Some members agreed immediately. Others remained cautious, but the facts were undeniable. The Krell had been unstoppable until humanity stopped them. In less than a week, the humans accomplished what the entire Unity Pact could not. Meanwhile, on the surface of Valara Prime, Lieutenant Tay walked through a temporary camp with Sergeant Baum. They discussed the mission. Both agreed it felt different than the wars they fought on Earth. Those conflicts had been complicated. Politics, resources, ideology. There were rarely clear heroes and villains, but this was simple. Innocent people needed help. They provided it. There was a moral clarity to this mission that human conflicts often lacked. Tay suggested that perhaps humanity's violent past had prepared them for a more peaceful future. If they could use their strength to protect rather than conquer, maybe all the suffering that shaped them had meaning. Baum agreed. He watched a group of Valaran children playing near the camp. They were laughing, playing, acting like children should. A week ago, they were terrified refugees hiding from monsters. Now they felt safe enough to play. That was because humans stood guard. He thought about his own childhood on Earth, growing up during the Unification Wars, seeing violence regularly, learning to fight as a teenager. His life had been hard, but maybe that hardness had a purpose. Maybe he suffered so that these children would not have to. That evening, Day received a message from Earth. Commander Yun congratulated her on a successful mission. But there was also a warning. Not everyone in the galaxy was happy about humanity's intervention. Some species saw it as a dangerous precedent. Some had their own ambitions that conflicted with a strong human presence in galactic affairs. On a distant station, far from Valara Prime, representatives from several militaristic species held a secret meeting. They watched recordings of the human victory. They analyzed human tactics. They assessed the threat. These species had been expanding their territories slowly, carefully, using force against weaker civilizations, taking what they wanted. The Unity Pact had been too weak to stop them, but now there was a new variable: humanity. If the Deathworlders became the galaxy's protectors, it would interfere with their plans. They needed to act, either discredit humanity somehow, or eliminate them before they grew too powerful. The galaxy was changing. Humanity had proven their worth in combat. But that same combat effectiveness made them a threat to some. The future was uncertain. New conflicts were brewing, but for now on Valara Prime there was peace. The humans remained in orbit, making sure no Krell survivors returned. On the surface, reconstruction began. Valarans and humans worked side by side. Different species, different worlds, different experiences, but united in a common purpose. Hana stood in the ruins of the meditation garden with Day. She thanked her again. For everything. For coming when called. For fighting so hard. For caring enough to risk human lives for people they had never met. Day simply nodded. She said it was what soldiers did. They stood between danger and those who could not protect themselves. That was the job, the duty, the honor. And Hana finally understood what it meant to be a Deathworlder. It meant being forged by a harsh world into something strong, something dangerous, but it also meant choosing. The dropships fell through the atmosphere like meteors. Inside, 3,000 human soldiers sat in silence. They wore powered armor that hummed with energy. Their weapons were locked and loaded. Every face was calm. This was what they trained for. Sergeant Baum checked his squad one final time. 8 soldiers. All veterans. All trusted. He had fought beside most of them for years. They had survived wars on Earth. They had faced human enemies, which meant they had faced the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy. The Krell would be bad, but humans had faced worse. They had faced each other. The orbital bombardment began as the dropships descended. Railgun projectiles streaked down from the fleet, slamming into the edges of the Krell hive. Explosions bloomed across the surface. The bombardment was precise and limited, exactly as promised. Just enough to disrupt the Krell and create confusion. The dropships landed in a semicircle around the hive. The rear ramps dropped and soldiers poured out. They moved fast, establishing a defensive perimeter. Squad leaders called out positions. Heavy weapons teams set up their equipment. Everything happened in seconds, smooth, practiced, perfect. The Krell responded immediately. They came from the hive in a black wave. Thousands of warrior drones, each the size of a large dog but built like a nightmare. 6 legs carried them across the broken ground at terrible speed. Their mandibles clicked and snapped. Acid dripped from their projector organs. The humans opened fire. The sound was deafening. Hundreds of weapons firing in coordinated bursts. The Krell ran straight into a wall of bullets. The front ranks were torn apart, but more came behind them. Always more. That was the Krell way. Overwhelmed through numbers, but the humans held their ground. Baum's squad occupied a position on the left flank. He watched the Krell charge through his weapon's scope. He called out targets. His squad fired in rotation. Never all at once, always maintaining fire. When one soldier reloaded, another covered them. Basic tactics, but deadly effective. A group of Krell broke through the initial fire line. They reached the human positions. This was where most species would have broken. Close combat with the Krell was supposed to be suicide. Their claws could tear through most armor. Their acid could melt flesh, but human-powered armor was built for Earth's high gravity. It was thick, strong. The Krell claws scratched the surface but did not penetrate, and the humans inside were not helpless. They had trained for close combat. They used their armored fists and rifle stocks as clubs. They moved with brutal efficiency, breaking legs and crushing thoraxes. One Krell warrior latched onto Baum's arm and sprayed acid directly at his helmet. The acid ran off. The armor's coating was designed specifically to resist chemical attacks. Baum grabbed the Krell by its head and smashed it against the ground until it stopped moving. The battle raged for 2 hours. The Krell kept coming. The humans kept killing them. The ground around the human perimeter became carpeted with Krell bodies. But the soldiers maintained discipline. No panic, no chaos, just steady, controlled violence. Lieutenant Tay led the main assault force deeper into the hive. Her team consisted of 50 elite soldiers carrying heavy weapons and explosives. Their mission was simple. Find the Queen, kill her. Without the Queen, the hive would collapse. The hive interior was dark and organic. The walls pulsed with bioluminescence. The air was thick with pheromones that made most species confused and disoriented. But human evolution had not relied heavily on pheromones for communication. The Krell chemical signals meant nothing to them. They moved through the tunnels in tactical formation. Pointman checking corners, rear guard watching behind. Everyone alert. Everyone ready. The Krell attacked from side passages and from above. The humans responded instantly. No hesitation. See target. Shoot target. Move forward. Tay checked her tactical display. The Queen should be in the central chamber, deep in the hive's core. They were close now. The tunnels were getting wider. The walls were changing, becoming more elaborate. This was the royal section. The Krell resistance increased. Elite warriors appeared, larger than the standard drones, faster, smarter. They worked in coordinated groups. They tried to flank the human team. They tried to separate and isolate individual soldiers. It did not work. The humans moved as a single unit. When one soldier was pressured, two others provided covering fire. When the Krell tried to surround them, the humans repositioned and created new firing lanes. They were fighting in a dark alien hive against an enemy that evolved for this environment. And they were winning. Tay reached the Queen's chamber. It was massive. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, and in the center the Queen, she was huge, easily 10 meters long. Her body was bloated with egg sacs. Hundreds of warrior drones surrounded her, forming a living wall of claws and acid. The Queen's mandibles clicked in complex patterns. Pheromones flooded the chamber. She was calling every Krell in the hive to defend her. Tay smiled behind her helmet. The Queen's presence was impressive. But intimidation only worked if your enemy could feel fear. She gave the order. Heavy weapons forward. The human team unleashed everything. Heavy machine guns tore through the warrior drones. Plasma cutters carved burning paths through the living wall. Grenades detonated in clusters, sending body parts flying. The chamber became a hell of fire and death. The Queen screamed. It was a sound that no human had heard before. High-pitched and terrible, but screaming did not stop bullets. The warriors around her died. The protective wall crumbled, and the humans pushed forward. Tay and 3 others reached the Queen. They placed explosive charges at the base of her egg sacs. The Queen thrashed. Her mandibles snapped. One soldier was caught and torn in half. But the others completed their mission. Tay triggered the charges and ran. The explosion was massive. It collapsed part of the chamber. The Queen died instantly, her body torn apart by the blast, and throughout the hive the effect was immediate. The warrior drones stopped their coordinated attacks. They became confused, disoriented. Without the Queen's pheromone signals, they lost direction. The humans pressed their advantage. They swept through the hive, clearing room by room. The Krell were no longer fighting as a coordinated force. They were individuals scared and lost. The battle became a cleanup operation. By dawn, the hive was destroyed. Engineering teams moved in with industrial explosives. They collapsed the tunnels and burned the organic structures. Nothing would remain. The Krell would not be coming back. Bomb stood on the surface watching the sun rise over Valara Prime. His armor was scorched and dented. He had fought through the night without stopping. He was exhausted, but alive around him other soldiers were doing the same. Some sat quietly. Some tended to wounds. A few were helping the Velaran survivors who were emerging from hiding. Despite the carnage they had just delivered, the soldiers were gentle with the civilians. They shared water. They provided medical assistance. They smiled and tried to communicate despite the language barrier. Lieutenant Tay made her report to Captain Day. The mission was complete. The Krell were eliminated. Human casualties were 142 dead, 237 wounded. Within acceptable parameters for an assault of this magnitude, aboard the Relentless, Hana heard those numbers and felt sick. 142 dead. To the humans, this was acceptable. They spoke about their fallen comrades with respect but without excessive grief. They had known the risks. They had accepted them. And now they honored the dead by completing the mission. Hana did not understand this mentality. Velarans mourned for days when a single person died. But humans seemed to view death as simply part of their profession. Not something to be sought, but something to be accepted when necessary. She thought about what it meant to come from a death world. A place so dangerous that loss was constant, that violence was normal, that every generation had to learn to fight just to survive. The humans were shaped by their world, and now they were using that terrible strength to protect others. On the surface, Baum removed his helmet and breathed the alien air. It was different from Earth, lighter, cleaner. He looked at the crystal towers in the distance. They had survived. The human assault had been precise enough to spare most of the Valaran cultural sites. A Valaran child approached him cautiously. She was small and blue-skinned, with 4 large eyes that stared at him with wonder and fear. Baum knelt down to her level. He smiled and offered her a ration bar. Chocolate. Kids loved chocolate, no matter what species. The child took it hesitantly. She tasted it. Her eyes went wide with delight, and she smiled back at him. Baum thought about why he fought, about what it meant to be a soldier. It was not about glory. It was not about conquest. It was about moments like this, about protecting those who could not protect themselves. about standing between the darkness and the light. The Deathworlders had come. They had fought. And they had won. Valara Prime was saved. The emergency meeting room on Earth was crowded with military leaders and government officials. Commander Yun stood at the front, her hands pressed flat against the table. The holographic display above them showed the Valara system. Red markers indicated Krell positions. They were everywhere. The debate had been going for hours. Some officials were suspicious. Was this a trap? Why would the galaxy suddenly reach out to humanity after avoiding them for so long? Others argued that the situation was exactly what it appeared to be. Innocent people were dying and Earth had the power to help. Yun ended the debate with a single statement. Humanity had spent centuries fighting each other. They knew the cost of war better than any species in the galaxy. If they could use that terrible knowledge to save lives instead of taking them, then they had a responsibility to act. The decision was made. Earth would respond. Within 48 hours, a fleet was assembled. 11 ships total. 6 warships designed for extended combat. 3 troop carriers loaded with soldiers and equipment. 2 supply vessels carrying ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies. The fleet was not large by Earth standards, but it was more military power than most species had ever seen in one place. Captain Day stood on the bridge of the UES Relentless, watching her crew prepare for departure. She was tall for a human woman, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her uniform was plain and practical. No decorations, no ceremony, just function. That was how she liked it. She had read the reports about the Krell. She had studied their tactics and capabilities. They were dangerous, but they were also predictable. They relied on numbers and aggression. They had never faced an enemy that could match their violence and exceed their coordination. They had never faced humans. The fleet launched. The journey would take 5 days using human faster-than-light technology. It was slower than what most advanced species used, but it was reliable. Human ships were built like tanks. Heavy, armored, covered in weapons. They were not elegant. They were not beautiful. But they were effective. On the 5th day, the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valara system. Day studied the tactical display. The Krell had dozens of bioships spread throughout the system. They had complete control of orbital space around Valara Prime. On the surface, their hive was growing. A small diplomatic vessel approached the human fleet. Hana was aboard. She had been waiting at the system's edge for days, hoping the humans would actually come. Now they were here, and she felt a mix of relief and terror. She boarded the Relentless and was escorted to the bridge. The first thing she noticed was how cramped everything felt. Human ships were not designed for comfort. Every surface was covered in controls, displays, or equipment. The crew moved with quick efficiency, calling out reports and acknowledgments. Then she saw Captain Day. Hana had studied human anatomy in preparation for this meeting, but seeing one in person was different. Day was solid muscle and bone. Her body was designed for a world with gravity that would crush most species. Her eyes were forward-facing. Predator eyes. Everything about her screamed danger. But when Day spoke, her voice was calm and professional. She asked Hana for a tactical update. How many Krell ships? What were their positions? What remained of the Valaran defense forces? How many civilians were still on the surface? Hana answered as best she could. Her hands shook as she provided the data. Day listened carefully, her expression never changing. Then she turned to her crew and started giving orders. The terminology was completely foreign to Hana. Fire solutions, defensive formations, target priorities, kill zones. The humans spoke about combat like it was a science, because for them it was. The human fleet moved toward Valara Prime. The Krell detected them immediately and moved to intercept. 37 bioships against 11 human vessels. The numbers favored the Krell heavily, but numbers were not everything. Day ordered her fleet into a defensive formation. The heavy cruisers formed the front line, their thick armor facing the enemy. The lighter ships stayed behind them, protected but ready to support. It was a formation humans had used for thousands of years. A phalanx, a wall of steel. The Krell attacked the way they always did. They swarmed. Their bioships accelerated to ramming speed, spreading out to surround the enemy. It was a tactic that had worked against every species they had ever fought. Overwhelming numbers, multiple attack vectors, chaos. But the humans did not panic. They did not break formation. They waited. When the Krell ships entered range, Day gave a single word. Fire. The human railgun spoke. The weapons fired solid projectiles at incredible speed. No energy beams, no exotic technology, just metal moving at a fraction of light speed. The physics were simple and brutal. When the projectiles hit the Krell bioships, they punched straight through. The organic hulls offered no protection. The impacts caused massive internal damage. Ships broke apart. Atmosphere vented into space. Krell warriors died by the thousands. The Krell had never faced weapons like this. Their acid projectors splashed against the human ship's armor. The humans had designed their defenses specifically to resist chemical weapons. The acid ran off like water. The battle became a slaughter. The Krell could not adapt. Their tactics required the enemy to break, to scatter, to panic. But humans did not break. They held formation. They maintained fire discipline. Each shot was calculated and precise. Hana watched from the bridge, unable to look away. She had expected a fight. She had expected casualties on both sides. She had not expected this. The humans were destroying the Krell with cold efficiency. There was no anger in their actions, no hatred, just professional competence. In 47 minutes, 16 Krell ships were destroyed. The remaining vessels retreated toward the outer system. Day did not pursue them. She had a more important target. The hive on the surface. The human fleet established orbit around Valara Prime. Day called a meeting with her senior officers. Hana was invited to attend. She listened as the humans discussed their next move. They spoke about orbital bombardment, about acceptable collateral damage, about the need to destroy the hive before the Krell could consolidate their position. Hana found her voice. She begged them to minimize damage to the surface. The crystal cities were thousands of years old. They were irreplaceable. Her people's entire culture was built around them. Day listened. Then she spoke. She explained that orbital bombardment would be the safest option for human forces. They could destroy the hive from space with minimal risk. But she understood Hana's concerns. She was willing to risk her soldiers with a ground assault if it meant preserving Velaran culture. However, some bombardment would be necessary to give the ground forces a chance. That was the compromise, Hana agreed. She had no other choice. The humans were here to help, but they would do it their way. Lieutenant Tay arrived on the bridge. She was the ground forces commander. She was shorter than Day, but just as solid. Her armor was scarred from previous battles. She carried a weapon that looked heavy enough to break bones if you swung it like a club. Tay reviewed the tactical data. She asked questions. How deep was the hive? What were the Krell warrior capabilities? What was the estimated enemy strength? Then she turned to her squad leaders and started planning the assault. Hana listened to them discuss tactics. Drop zones, fire support, extraction points. Casualty estimates, that last one made Hana's blood run cold. The humans expected to lose soldiers. They had calculated how many, and they were going ahead with the plan anyway. The concept was incomprehensible to her. Valarans avoided conflict precisely because they could not accept losses. But humans seemed to view it as just another factor in their planning. Tai looked at Hana and smiled. It was not a cruel smile. It was confident. She told Hana not to worry. Her soldiers were the best. They trained for situations like this. They would get the job done. Hana wanted to believe her. She had to believe her, because the alternative was watching her world die. The preparations took 12 hours. Human efficiency was astounding. Every soldier knew their role. Every piece of equipment was checked and rechecked. There was no chaos, no confusion, just smooth coordination born from endless training. As the dropships prepared to launch, Hana stood at the viewport and looked down at her world. The Krell hive was visible from orbit, a dark stain spreading across the beautiful landscape. Soon the humans would descend. Soon battle would be joined. And Hana prayed that she had made the right choice in calling for the Deathworlders. The morning sun rose over Valara Prime, painting the crystal towers in shades of purple and gold. Hana stood at her window, watching the light dance through the city. She loved these quiet moments before the day began. The streets below were empty, peaceful. Her people were still sleeping, safe in their homes. Everything changed when the alarm started. The sound was sharp and terrible. Hana had never heard it before. No one on Valara Prime had. Her communication device buzzed against her wrist. She pressed it with trembling fingers. The voice on the other end was panicked. The outer colonies were gone. Hana ran to the government center. Other officials were already there, their four eyes wide with fear. The large display screens showed images from the colony worlds. What she saw made her blood turn cold. Massive ships, organic and pulsing, hung in space like diseased organs. They were not machines. They were alive. And they were destroying everything. The Krell had arrived. Hana knew the stories. Every civilized species in the galaxy knew about the Krell. They were nightmares made real. A swarm of insect warriors that consumed entire worlds. They took everything and left nothing behind. No one had ever stopped them. Species that faced the Krell either ran or died. Within hours, 3 colonies were silent. Within a day, 7 more went dark. The Krell were moving toward Valara Prime itself. The Valaran defense fleet tried to stop them. Their elegant ships, designed for exploration and ceremony, moved to intercept the bioships. It was useless. The Krell acid weapons ate through their shields like they were made of paper. The Valaran ships broke apart, their crews lost to the void. Hana received emergency orders. She was the Valaran ambassador to the Galactic Unity Pact. She needed to go to the Council immediately. She needed to ask for help. Her ship left Valara Prime as the first Krell vessels entered orbit. She looked back at her world through the viewport. The beautiful crystal cities were still standing. But for how long? The journey to the Council station took 2 days. They were the longest 2 days of Hana's life. Every hour brought new reports. The Krell were landing on Valara Prime. They were building something on the surface. A hive. Her people were being taken. Millions of them. She wanted to scream. She wanted to turn back. But she had a mission. The Galactic Unity Council met in a grand chamber that floated in space. Representatives from dozens of peaceful species gathered there. Hana entered the room and felt all eyes turn to her. They knew why she was there. They had seen the reports. She stood in the center of the chamber. Her voice shook as she spoke. Her people were dying. The Krell were destroying everything her civilization had built over thousands of years. The Valarans had no weapons that could fight back. They needed help. They were begging for help. The council members listened. Their faces showed sympathy. But Hana also saw fear in their eyes. She saw hesitation. One by one, the representatives spoke. They expressed sorrow for Valara Prime. They condemned the Krell attack, but none of them offered military help. The Lithians said their crystal technology could not stop the Krell. The Mirians explained that their water-based weapons were useless in space. The Ethers admitted they had no experience with combat. Every species in the Unity Pact was peaceful. They had defensive technology, but nothing that could match the Krell's aggression. They evolved on gentle worlds. They built civilizations based on art and science and philosophy. War was something they read about in history files. It was not something they knew how to do. Hana felt despair rising in her chest. She had come so far. She had hoped so much. And now she was hearing that the galaxy could not help her, that her people would die alone. Then Elder Bora spoke. Bora was old even by galactic standards. He had served on the council for decades. He had seen many crises. His voice was quiet but firm. There was one option they had not discussed. One species they had not contacted. The humans. The chamber fell silent. Hana saw the other council members exchange nervous glances. She knew about humans, but only from rumors and warnings. They came from a planet called Earth, a death world, one of the most dangerous planets ever discovered. The humans evolved alongside massive predators. They survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions. They fought terrible wars among themselves. Most civilized species avoided humans. They were too violent, too unpredictable. They had something called a military. Trained killers. Professional warriors. The very concept was disturbing to peaceful species. But Bora made a simple point. The humans had experience with combat. Real combat. They had fought and won wars. They had technology designed specifically for destruction. They were the only species in known space that might actually be able to stop the Krell. The debate that followed was fierce. Some council members argued that inviting humans would be dangerous. What if they decided to conquer instead of help? What if they were worse than the Krell? Others pointed out that they had no choice. The Krell were destroying Valara Prime right now. Every minute of debate cost lives. Hana listened to them argue. She thought about her home. She thought about the crystal towers being torn down. She thought about her people being taken by the Krell. She thought about doing nothing because the galaxy was afraid of the only species that could help. She stood up and spoke again. Her voice was stronger this time. She told the council that her people were dying. Right now, while they debated about potential threats, real people were suffering and dying. She would rather take a chance on the humans than watch her entire species be destroyed. If the humans proved to be dangerous, they could deal with that problem later. But first, her people needed to survive. The council voted. It was close, but they agreed to send a message to Earth. The message was simple and direct. An innocent species was being destroyed by an enemy no one else could stop. The galaxy had no warriors, no soldiers, no one who knew how to fight. They were asking Earth for help. They knew humans were considered dangerous. They knew humans came from a death world, but they also knew humans were their only hope. Would humanity answer? Hana waited at the council station for a response. She could not return to Valara Prime. The Krell controlled the space around her world now. She could only watch from a distance as the reports came in. The hive was growing. Her people were running out of places to hide. The beautiful cities were being consumed. 2 days passed. Hana barely slept. She spent her time in the observation room, staring at the stars, praying to whatever force governed the universe that the humans would come, that they would be willing to help, that the stories about their violence could somehow save her people instead of threatening them. On the 3rd day, the response arrived. The message was short. Earth had received their plea. They understood the situation. A military response fleet was being prepared. They would arrive at Valara Prime within 1 week. The humans were coming. Hana felt relief flood through her body, but it was mixed with fear. She had no idea what to expect. She had never met a human before. She had never seen their ships or their weapons. She did not know if they would be saviors or something worse, but they were coming. The Deathworlders were coming to fight the Krell. For the first time since the invasion began, Hana felt something like hope. She sent a message back to what remained of the Valaran government. Help was on the way. They just needed to survive a little longer. Hide, run, stay alive. The humans were coming. As she stood in the observation room, looking toward the distant star where Earth hung in space, Hana wondered what she had set in motion. The galaxy was about to meet humanity, and nothing would ever be the same.